Hey Ben, how are you?
Hi, Dominic. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. It's nice to have you on the line here.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, Ben might be a little scared of me, and we'll tell you why. He may be a little cautious of
There's a good story.
who's this Rubino character. Yeah. So Ben, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. We're going to be talking about something that's really important.
Yeah,
Uh, you know manufacturing really well. You've got a cool angle on that my listeners are not going to expect.
yeah, and it's so important too.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about how to control costs.
hmm
But before we do that, why don't we tell people a little bit about yourself and your background, then maybe we'll share the how we met story.
Sure. So I am Ben Wann, and I've spent the last few years becoming really strong in cost accounting and manufacturing. So I've worked at a bunch of different companies, helping them develop cost models to understand the profitability of their business and to make better decisions.
Mm.
So in my journey, I've earned a ton of letters after my name, a certified public accountant, certified management accountant, and also an MBA. So I've been out there trying to pull in as much knowledge as possible.
Pretty interesting. And right now we're talking to you. Those of you who are listening to this as a podcast, you may not know this, but it's a video as well. And Ben, you've got this exciting background behind you, a white wall, and I can hear machinery going. What kind of factory are you in right now?
We are at a cheese factory.
What?
So yes, it's a has delicious benefits of working here.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you in Wisconsin?
I am not. We have a factory in Illinois right on the border, but I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with the Amish.
Excellent. What kind of cheeses do you guys make?
We make a ton of white cream cheese, the Alouette cheese spreads, goat cheese. Uh, if if you can dream it, we probably make it.
Excellent. Well, and the reason that we have you on and you know this show is for
Yeah.
manufacturers of finished wood products. And those
hmm
of my listeners who've been listening to me for a while know that I bring in guests from other industries. So they're not necessarily surprised. I love it. I mean, I love it that you're in a different industry and it's so specific, cheese, but the moving parts are the same. You've got labor, skilled and semi-skilled, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you've got machinery,
Yep.
you've got inputs, and in your case, your inputs have best before dates. So there can't be inventory sitting around,
Correct.
right? On either side of the pre-manufacture, post-manufacture, and then you've got tolerances that you have to operate within. So it's very similar
hmm
to what our listeners are. We just, a lift of wood can sit around for a long time, whereas a lift of raw milk probably shouldn't.
It should not.
Yeah, I guess. Should we tell everybody how we met? Do you want to tell it or do I?
Sure, I'll start. So
Sure.
I was having a nice, relaxing evening, and I go to check my email, and I get a message from somebody I've never met saying, "Hey, I've tracked you down across the internet. I saw that you recently published a book, and I'd love to learn about you and hear more about you." And the surprising thing was, I just published the book I've been working on 1 hour before that message.
So that's the power of the internet. But I'll tell you, for me, what was important in that is that it's neat how the world lines up. Because
Mhm.
the reason I even reached out to you is because of a lady who I've worked with before. I hope she's listening. I won't share her full name or her company. Her name's Monica. She's an absolute spitfire of a businesswoman. She's so smart. Her and her husband are completely focused on lean and constant improvement and really always looking for ways to make their company better. And between you and me, they've got a great business already.
Hmm.
But they're always looking for that extra edge. So she sent me an email and said, "Hey, Dom, can you do some topics, find some really good speakers on the financial side?" And so
Yep.
she ran through this list of different financial questions that she had as they're on this growth path. And so I then went to Amazon to look for respected authors. Ben, you are now a respected author.
Uh, I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you to you and thank you to Monica for suggesting the topic. Let's get into this, though. Let's talk about cost accounting in a manufacturing facility.
Sure.
Where would you take that conversation if I was a business owner? What would you want to talk to me about, the high points, the important points?
The most important things that I think any type of business owner or manufacturer has to understand is how how to track and classify your costs so that you can make smart decisions, right? Any business owner is going to have, say, 5 key questions. What should we sell this product at? How much money are we making on each sale? What does our product cost? How can we reduce costs and improve efficiency? And what are our most profitable products? And a lot of people, they use intuition instead of data and systems to manage that process. So there's a lot of improvement there.
Yeah. How do I start? I mean, the people that are listening to this are down a path, right? They've already separated themselves from the pack because they've said to themselves, hey, listen, I run a shop like a lot of other people run a shop, but I need to get better. I need to find out more. And so they start to listen to podcasts like this or read books like yours.
Yeah.
But where do I start? Where's first nugget?
Mm-hmm. The first thing that you do is you have to kind of press pause, and you have to gather all your records for your cost and your costs and your production over the last few months.
Uh-huh.
And you want to be able to analyze those costs and systemize them to understand what's fixed, what's variable, what's a direct cost, indirect, what goes into overhead, what goes into selling, because each of these types of costs roll into the equation to help you determine, what's your break-even point? How do you reach a certain level of profit? And if you don't have that defined, it's kind of mucky,
Do you mind if we do this? It might seem basic to you, but I think, given my conversations with business owners over the years, that taking a minute to define these ones, I wrote very quickly, so excuse me if I get it wrong. Fixed, variable, direct, indirect, and then you said a break even. But let's do those first 4.
Sure. Sure.
What's a fixed cost?
Sure. So a fixed cost is something that does not fluctuate with changes in the level of activity. A good example might be your permit fees or your rent fees. If you have to pay that cost no matter what, no matter how many units you produce.
Right.
So you can lower that rate by producing more or less, but you always have to, if you're in business, incur that cost.
Right. It's interesting that you say that. One of the things that I've often talked to business owners about is to start thinking about your shop as a man.
Yep.
And I don't mean man versus woman. But think about your shop as having a cost, just like a labor cost. Saturdays and Sunday at 1 a.m, it still costs you to have that shop, that rent, that insurance, that permit process, all of the things that, the energy that's still running through there while the shop is closed. That's what you mean? That kind of thing?
Sure.
Okay.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
And then what about variables? How do I define variable costs?
Sure. So a variable cost is something that changes as you produce more or less. So every unit has a proportional relationship with the cost. So if you're making more cabinets, right, you're going to use more glue, more screws, more sandpaper, more wood.
Yeah. How do you guys track those variable costs? I'm sure you have them in cheese manufacture. I would imagine the rennet or whatever additives you put in, the coloring, wrapping, packaging.
Yep.
What are some simple systems that I might have to put in place to track my variable costs?
Mm-hmm. We're a larger company, so we use SAP, and that helps us systemize the process. So if we receive a material, it's automatically tagged as being a variable cost in our production system. But if you're a smaller entity, the good news is that there's a lot of cost-effective options out there to begin systemizing. Technology's come a far way with the number of tools that are out there and how easily and effectively they can be put into place.
Right. I like that. I like that little hint you dropped there about tagging that product immediately as a variable cost when it comes in.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I could even do with QuickBooks or the other systems out there.
Correct.
By understanding those are consumables that get used on a percentage basis per job. And then because it'd be a hassle to try and figure out how much adhesive we're going to use on a project.
Correct. So some cost, like adhesive, goes into your overhead bucket. So you don't track how many ounces of glue you put. Say how much glue you use in a day or a week, and you allocate that cost among all your production. But something that's more of a major cost, a direct material, that is your wood, you would track job by job.
Mm,
So there's a bit of materiality factor there. So you're not spending too much time chasing, nickels and pennies.
yeah.
But
Interesting. I mean, you have to start somewhere. So the first thing is
yes,
understanding fixed versus variable, because those go into the cost accounting,
yes,
and then understanding where where the line is between getting crazy about an eighth of an ounce of adhesive versus we buy 40-gallon buckets of it.
yeah, yeah. The best way to think about it is if you ever heard of the Pareto principle, 20% of the result, or sorry, 80% of the results are result 20% of the inputs, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you don't want to track everything. You want to find out what your biggest hitters are and keep an eye on those.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen as a trend, this is certainly across North America. I haven't heard about it in places like Australia or New Zealand or South Africa, is having like a managed inventory program.
Yep.
So that a finished wood shop, doesn't matter if they're making furniture or cabinetry, would go to one of their suppliers and arrange with their supplier that the supplier will come in and count their abrasives, their adhesives, their fasteners. And
Yep.
somewhere there's a central inventory. The person from that supplier comes in and counts them, and then they do the work of making sure you're topped up on fasteners. And so it's a managed inventory program. If
Exactly.
people have that, it makes that variable cost easier to track.
And that's smart because, if you don't have a bracket to finish a job, someone has to go out and get one, work stops, and then you're just incurring more labor costs, overhead for the project. So having a systemized approach to how you bring your inventory in, consume it, and manage it's really, really smart, really important.
So let me ask you a question. You just brought up a really good point, and some people listening are asking this already. When I send a guy out of the shop to go to Home Depot to get one bracket to finish a job, where does that fall in the accounting world? What is that? What kind of cost is that? Fixed, variable, direct, indirect, or oops?
The connection's a little spotty. Can you repeat that?
Oh, it's okay. I tried to make a joke and it fell flat. Where does that, when I send a guy out of the shop to go get a one-off product to finish a project, what kind of cost am I incurring there that I didn't think about? Does that fall under fixed, variable, direct, indirect, or an oopsie?
That'd be direct. You would charge that to the project.
Interesting. Or charge that against your profits on the project.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we've got fixed, a little definition of fixed, a definition of variable. What about direct costs?
Okay. A direct cost is something that is directly related to a product and you can conveniently trace it. If you are making cabinets, a certain piece of wood, you clearly put on a certain job. But indirect, the opposite of it is, again, we talk about glue or adhesive.
Right.
And that determines how much attention and focus you put on tracking those items.
Have you seen companies where they'll say, look, for any given job, we're going to allocate a number, 5% or 0.5% to indirect costs or variable costs, even things down to the filters on the painter's mask and the chemicals we use to clean the painting equipment. It's almost impossible to track that. So instead, we'll go to the front end of the process and say, every time we bid a job, we're going to add, I'll just use a silly number, 1% that gets allocated. So we add 1% to the quote and that gets allocated for miscellaneous. Do you see people doing that, or is there a better way?
Oh, shoot, I'm having trouble with the connectivity on the video.
Oh, okay. Well, don't worry about the video. Did you hear me on the audio?
No.
Oh, okay. How do you see people tracking those costs? Can you add a miscellaneous bucket to your selling process and say, for any job that we sell, we'll add 1% to the sales cost, to the actual finished bid, and then allocate that back in? Is that something that makes people like you happy, or is that messy?
Depends on how much stuff you're putting into that. And the trick too is to do a cost study every now and then to reassess that percentage. As your business changes, it might not be the same 3 years later or 5 years later. So stopping every couple months or every year to review your overhead allocation is smart. And you just want to be careful not to have everything thrown into one line item. So if you are going to do allocations, break it into several, but not so it takes up too much time.
Right, right. How would I guide my accountant or my financial person on site to help me with this?
What you would want to do is you would bring them in and walk them through your operation, familiarize them with everything that you have going on, and make your records accessible to them, and then work with them to create the model. So they'll have a few ideas on how things should be costed or categorized, but then you want to go back and forth with them and make sure you have the same understanding.
Right.
And creating one of these models you can't do it in a silo. You have to work collaboratively. So you want to bring in different people from your shop to make sure you have the best understanding of the cost behaviors.
Oh, that's interesting. So, and it's funny that that's something that we would do anyways, is go to the people on our shop and ask them what could be done better, how they do their job. What do you typically use for a job that I might not think about? So not as an aside, but to add to this, I run something called a profit lab when I'm walking around with my people or I have meetings with my people. And in profit lab, I'll have a meeting with Ben, my finance guy, as an example. But at the end of the meeting, we do this little profit lab piece. And it's very simple. From an owner's perspective, it's a simple question. Ben, what are we doing that you see us doing that either costs us or makes us time or money?
Oh, that's good.
And so then I just have to be quiet. And then you would say, Dom, we are getting robbed on postage because of X, Y, and Z. And you would know that because of your job, but I would never know because I either haven't had the patience to listen to you or I've never asked the question.
Yep.
So imagine if I did that with my finisher or with my installer. Yeah.
And what you would want to do after you create a cost model and you bucket your costs is you want to be able to create targets for your jobs. And once you're finished, analyze the actuals versus the targets, and then do that with your team. Because again, you can have people question and challenge, say that's right or that's not right. So you're not just going on and on by yourself, thinking the information's right and it wind up not being.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, I think what Ben's talking about is the end of job report, and that end of job report is part of the free download that Ben, just on my website, there's some free downloads people get, and there's one that I have called the agenda for the finance and forecast meeting, and I've got the agenda and the script for how the leader would run that meeting. In that meeting, we would do an end of job report, the actual versus budgeted, because one of the problems in our industry is that jobs don't always end on a Tuesday.
Yes.
Right? And it's probably, for you guys, it's even worse because jobs are, it's just a continuous batch.
It is. We can run like all day, 6 days a week. Yeah.
So when do you guys when do you go back and assess? Does it matter because it's always going, or do you end a batch or a project?
We end up by the shift. So we're always a day behind on our reporting with getting the data in. And then we have controls in place to make sure that stuff is input accurately. Because an important thing to know is if you have garbage coming in, you'll have garbage coming out. So creating a process that's painless for people to do their job right and get the information into the system is such a critical point.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that GIGO method, garbage in, garbage out. And Ben's not talking about actual trash in the dumpster. You mean data. Like when an owner gets bad data coming in, it only leads to bad data or decisions coming out.
Yep.
Right? So cleaning that data. Yeah, interesting. What are some mistakes that you see happening in operations because we don't understand what you have to do in finance?
Some of the mistakes that I see in operations.
Maybe I should rephrase that. We don't think they're a mistake. We're doing our best. But for you on the finance side, it's causing a frustration or a gap. Yeah.
One of the things that we struggle a lot with here is direct labor reporting. So right now, we have a ton of staff on our factory, and we have several lines running. and people are constantly going from line to line. So being able to assess exactly how much direct labor you have on that line is very difficult for us.
Oh, so here we might talk about it so let me assume something for your side. You're saying you've got a soft cheese line and a hard cheese line.
Yep.
And if a guy leaves the hard cheese line and works for an hour on the soft cheese line, are we capturing that properly? Is that
Correct.
And so for us, I think that same thing happens because you're working on the Smith house and then you're working on the Jones house, but all the person on the floor says is I worked 8 hours today.
Yeah, and your financial model could be based on another assumption saying we only need half this amount of labor.
Yeah.
And those are what known as like a hidden cost.
Yeah. How would I find something like that, or how would I tease that out?
Observation, really. If you can pick a process to watch a few hours at a time and just take notes and do process maps and just observe the process, compare that to your assumptions, that's the best way to really get your hand around this type of thing. You're not going to understand that by sitting in an office. You've got to get out there on the floor with your team.
Yeah. I mean, this is why people punch in job codes or at least write them down. Mm-hmm. And I think the job of the owner is to make sure that the foreman is getting those handwritten or punched in data reports.
Yeah. What I'm interested in right now and I'm really excited about are these no-code business applications. So someone can create an app that can be used on a phone or computer at a really low cost, and they can track it on the job line. People can input information rather than using paper. And the data all centralizes to like a Google Sheet. So you get rid of the different steps of writing something down, collecting it, analyzing it, re-aggregating it. You enter the data once, it goes into one system, and you can create controls so that something goofy won't go in there.
Right. Do you know the names of some of those programs? I mean, you're running SAP, so that's a very large enterprise level. But what are some of the other?
Sure. Two of them are App Sheets and then Glide Apps.
App Sheets, so APPSHEETS?
Yes.
And Glide Apps, spelled just like it sounds, Glide, like GLIDE.
Yep, and I can share the links to that, but there's been several case studies done where companies have saved an enormous amount of time, money, energy, frustration, and I'm actually working with our factory here to implement something like that on the line to track downtime.
Wow. It's funny, we all think that in our little nest, we're the only ones dealing with this problem, but you're a company making cheese, running SAP. For those of you who don't know, running SAP is a big deal. Yes. It's a big, enterprise level software that has its own support system internally. And you guys are still asking the questions, how do we manage fixed, variable, direct, indirect costs? Yep. The same thing as a small shop with maybe 6 people or 60 people.
Yeah. And so we still have challenges. No software is going to solve all of your problems. So you have to be creative with looking what's out there in the market to help you. And the world's moving fast, so that's the good news. There's more and more of these applications and tools coming out there.
What I found interesting is that here we are talking about technology and accounting, and when I asked how do we figure out labor costs properly, you said observation.
Yes.
Get out on the floor, and that's really where it starts, right? Is just being active and being aware of what's going on the floor, and then asking the questions that we need to ask.
That's it.
Wow. What else do I need to know about cost accounting?
What else do you need to know about cost accounting? How much time do you have?
Yeah, you've made a career of this, Ben.
Yes. Another thing with cost accounting, let me see, there's I can write a whole other book on it. But one of the key points is that you want to be aware that you don't have a system set up where you have your winning products subsidizing your losers. So we briefly talked about that with the allocation process. And again, I think that's worth really emphasizing. The least you can allocate, the better. We have that in our business. I'm sure cabinet makers do. You have a lot going on, and you don't know precisely who's making the money and who's losing the money. or even what the cost behavior is of certain jobs.
Right. Well, you don't know unless you start picking at it and digging into it. That's the end of job report.
Yep.
And it's so simple. It's, let's say that you choose, and now I'm speaking directly to the owners, and Ben, I want you to argue with me or disagree with me if I'm wrong in this overall approach. But let's say that the owner chooses the third Friday of every month. Just pick a day. Doesn't matter. But the third Friday of every month. And in that meeting, they're going to do their finance and forecast meeting. So attending that meeting will be their finance person, whether it's their bookkeeper or their controller or their accountant, if they're big enough to have that. That'll be themselves as the leader or the president, maybe their ops manager or foreman. And there may be somebody like a project manager or high level other person. We're all in that meeting together. The leader is going to run that meeting and say, here's what we're looking at for finance, the inputs, the outputs. And at some point in the meeting, they're going to say, let's look at the jobs that have closed since last month. So now I've got an estimated value of the Smith Jones and the Smith job and the Jones job, and etc. And we say we estimated it for this, and we think we built it for this. Is that at least a good place to start picking away at this?
Yes, that is a good place to start. But what I would encourage, because what would happen in some of those circumstances is the further you get away from results, it's harder for people to remember what happened. So if you can put some tools or processes in place to monitor, I guess, the exceptions or the unusual data and address that quickly, that's even better, because people's memory, the sooner you get to them to ask questions and check data, the better.
So we should be doing this meeting every Friday, not every third Friday.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, wow. Well, we'll see what people are saying on the other end of the podcast when they're listening to it. Because right now, in a lot of cases, we don't do it at all. We see it. I see it a lot where we're operating and we do accounting by knowing we've got money in the bank or we don't.
Yes.
But the same people listening to this type of call or podcast, I'm sorry, would be saying, how do I do that better? So that's a great point. You don't want to get too far away from the end of job, because I'll forget that we ended up having to order in a new box of fasteners for that job that we hadn't budgeted for. Yeah.
And you just hit on something else that's pretty important. The difference between cash accounting and accrual accounting. So that's matching the cost of production with the sale whenever it happens. So if you're incurring a cost in that week, you need to book the expense for it in that period. You don't want to recognize that expense when it's payday. So what that's going to do is that's going to minimize your ups and downs in all of your analysis and accounting.
So for clarity, for those listening, in a manufacturing context where we're going project by project, like our listeners are, is cash accounting or accrual accounting the right way to go? Accrual accounting. It's funny, I just had a meeting on this the other day. If somebody's approaching their September year end, and right now as Ben and I are talking, it's the end of August. This episode probably won't go live for a couple of months. But in that, we were trying to figure out what the year-end sales were going to be. And suddenly they had this list of jobs that they were about to bill for, but wouldn't get recognized until next year because just the way their accounting works. So I think the takeaway message I'm getting from you here is to go back to my finance person and say, are we doing cash or accrual accounting?
Yes. And what do we have to do to get to accrual accounting? Again, if it's going to be an enormous amount of time and energy, it might not be worth it, but you at least have to have a discussion to understand the benefits versus the time and cost.
Yeah. I think that one there, that little sub point you just added on, might be the big takeaway from today's call. Cash versus accrual accounting, and the frustrations or misunderstandings that go along with the differences between those when it comes down to how much cash I'm putting in my jeans at the end of the day, month, week, year.
Yeah. And if you're trying to manage how much cash you have in the bank, that's a key thing to have a strong grasp on. Yeah.
What do you think about people that do their own books and call in an accountant once a year?
I think that accountants are worth the money. It's without experience in it, or at least having a conversation with somebody, you might not see what they can do for you. But accountants today don't just count the numbers. They act as business advisors. They help you understand what you can be doing better, how you can better save money on your taxes, or do any type of other thing. So accountants help you understand your numbers, your business, and help you get to the future. So
Yeah.
I think that at least if you don't have an accountant right now, look around and have a few introductory calls with different businesses and see what they can do for you.
A few different accounting
Yeah.
businesses. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And ask around too for
ask
referrals.
around who's working with anybody else. There's a few professionals that I think you need to have. I won't say business coach because everybody would expect me to say that, but you need an accountant and you need a lawyer on your side because they bring perspective. An accountant looks at your numbers without any emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to say money is cold, but talking about money gets hot.
Yep.
So when I have somebody who's not passionate about my numbers and just looks at them and says, what about this versus this? That's the question I actually need to hear. Mm-hmm. But I might be avoiding it because there's some emotion wrapped up in it. It was a job that went bad. It was an account I didn't like. There was a labor issue. So I'm like, I want to put that job out of my mind. In reality, there's value in getting that question answered so that in the future, I don't make that same mistake, or I take advantage of the opportunity that was there. And that person who's got no interest in the numbers except the numbers themselves will bring that out.
Yeah. And another thing to add on that is to have a team of people behind you who you don't pay, who are kind of like your business advisors, who might be in the same industry, who you can talk with to compare notes.
Right.
Just if you're on track, if there's something better you can be doing. I'd also add them to my team.
Yeah. I would have to, that's a really wise statement because the majority of the people that I work with are members of an association, which means they've taken that step. Their business is at a certain level where they've decided, okay, now it's time to go get some inputs that I'm not getting from being in the office all the time. Go listen to other people or ask questions.
Yep.
And that kind of curiosity that's the next level that people talk about. It starts with curiosity.
Yeah, for my business, that's what I have, and it's so valuable.
Yeah. What made you decide to write a book on this, Ben?
Insanity. I've been building a business called The Numbers Guys Online, and I'm really passionate about helping share knowledge that has that real world focus and not so much just theory. Because who's manufacturing widgets? Every textbook is out there talking about widgets and this other nonsense that doesn't relate to anything. Like, how am I going to apply this to that? It's very hard to understand. So I am working with other people to share that knowledge and connect those dots.
Right.
So we have the website. I write a lot of articles. I do online courses. And then the book is just a natural extension of that.
Great. If somebody wants to get in touch with you or find out more about Ben, how do they do that?
Sure. I am all over LinkedIn. That's the main place I live. I also, again, have the site, thenumbersguys.com. There's a dash between each word. And those are the best ways.
Yeah. Can they stalk you on Amazon like I did?
Please do.
Awkward.
Yeah. I now have 3 books out there. There's another guy on my team who just put out another one to help understand kind of the bookkeeping aspect of things. So again, if you're trying to understand accounting, all these are great tools to have, and they're really reasonably priced. I think $10.
Yeah, I mean, the information is out there. I think for most people, and you may see this as well, the challenge is time. You know, it's a time allocation and also comfort zone. Yep. Because I'm used to being on the tools, so I know I can go add some value to my company on the tools. And the time that it takes to get ramped up on the finance side is time I could put in with the tools or with my family. And it's easy to get pulled away from the really important things in the business that bring you the profits. So you can, as I like to say, drive a newer truck, towing a nicer boat to a bigger cottage on a prettier lake. If those are the things you want in your life, you've got to start looking at profits really seriously.
Yeah, that goes back again to the coaching and having a team of advisors who can give you that information in like a really sharp punch.
Direct
punch.
All right. Hey, tell us something fun and interesting about cheese manufacture that we would not have known.
Oh, man, you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Cheese manufacturing. I'm not sure there's too many fun facts about cheese.
What's the most popular type of cheese?
The most popular cheese that we sell here are the Alouette deli spreads, but I think worldwide it's brie cheese. So our company's French based, and most people in France have brie in their fridge every day. But in the U.S., I think it's like 1 or 2% of people.
Really? I would have thought it was cheddar. And you're saying it's brie cheese worldwide?
Maybe just in France. My information source is biased.
Fair enough.
But I guess the interesting thing I found out is how delicious this cheese is, and like what an opportunity is for Americans to wake up and find out there's more things out there to try that aren't just cheddar or American cheese.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that part of what your company does is import cheeses from around the world and then repackage them, in different consumables in America. What are some of those more popular imported cheeses?
Sure. The most popular is called Ile-de-France, and that's from France. It's very popular. It's a brie cheese. And we also have Saint Albret. That's one. Supreme we've been importing, but now we're making that domestically as well. And that's the bulk of it.
Wow.
But it's so good. If you get a chance, go try some Saventia cheese.
I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm partial to the Italian cheeses.
Oh, no.
Wow. I'm Italian, right? So for me, it's the Asiago and the Provolone and, all the different cheeses that, yeah, anyways, we won't get into my cheese preferences because some people won't like hearing that, but I like flavorful cheese. We'll just say that. My dad, by the way, still makes cheese on the stove. It's a type of ricotta cheese that he makes by scalding it. So he doesn't add the rennet. He does it just by scalding, and it's really good. Things you didn't know about Don.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, thank you so much for joining us here. I appreciate your time, and I really love the perspective. I think it's really interesting bringing somebody from outside our industry to talk about our industry, because the layers that you add, you might not recognize them as unique or interesting, but my listeners would see similarities they didn't think about before, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I had a great time. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. But what's your email address if somebody wants to reach out? Oh, we just lost you there, Ben.
Sure. My email address is... Oh, my back?
Yep.
Okay. My email address is benjamin.wann1@gmail.com.
Great. All right. Thanks, Ben. Have a great day. I appreciate you being on the call.
All right. See you, Dominic.
Bye-bye.